Kalen Thorne brought his wolf to heel so smoothly, the beast barely stirred beneath his skin. The packed snow of the winter gathering grounds reflected moonlight like shattered glass, and for a split second, everything around the central bonfire looked ordinary. Pack members exchanging solstice gifts, warriors sharing mead from carved horns, children weaving between the legs of elders. A cold wind carried the scent of pine and roasted venison. Then she stepped into the firelight. Hello friends. Before we journey deeper into Kalen and Mireya's story, I invite you to subscribe and share in the comments where you're listening from. Your presence here matters. Now, let's continue. Mireya Ashwood, not a ghost, not a trick of winter magic. It was her. Hair longer than he remembered, dark waves braided with crimson berries and gold thread like she'd dressed for ceremony but not for him. A fur-lined cloak hung open despite the bitter cold, and beneath it, a deep wine-colored dress embroidered with lunar symbols fit snug at the bodice before flowing to the snow. Her cheeks held the flush of cold air, and her left hand where the faded lunar mark still lived on her wrist, rested protectively on the swell of her belly in a way that made Kalen's lungs forget their purpose. Pregnant. His body recognized it before his mind could build walls. His wolf surged, slamming against his control with a howl only he could hear. Pulse hammering. Claws threatening to break through fingertips. The gathering grounds narrowed until there was only the bonfire, the woman standing in its glow, and the undeniable curve of her body carrying what his instinct screamed was his. Mireya looked up. Their gazes locked across the distance like a collision neither could avoid. Her steps faltered, just half a heartbeat, a stumble so brief anyone else would have missed it. Then her face smoothed into something carefully blank, controlled, practiced. Like she'd prepared for this pain and refused to let it show. Kalen didn't move. Couldn't. Because in that moment, he wasn't the alpha king who'd led the Northridge pack through territorial wars and famine winters. He wasn't the wolf other alphas feared in treaty negotiations. He was just a male who had stood in a ritual circle 3 months ago and agreed to sever a mate bond because she'd asked him to, and was now watching his ex-Luna carry a child that every primal cell in his body recognized like a brand burned into his soul. Mireya kept walking. Her boots pressed softly into snow. 1 step, 2, 3, each one taking her toward the forest path that led to the outer territory cabins. Kalen's throat constricted. A storm of questions rose at once, battering against the careful control he'd maintained since the severance ritual. Why didn't you tell me? How far along? Are you alone? Who's protecting you? And beneath all of those, the question that wasn't really a question at all. Just a knowing that hit so deep it felt like bone memory. Is that mine? But he already knew. His wolf knew. The bond might be severed, suppressed, buried beneath ritual magic and moon water and spoken vows, but destiny didn't honor paperwork. Mireya reached the edge of the gathering circle. She didn't hesitate. Didn't glance back. She adjusted her cloak with one hand, the other still cradling her belly, and slipped into the flow of wolves heading toward the peripheral fires like she could disappear through sheer force of will. Kalen's feet might as well have been rooted in permafrost. His entire body screamed go after her. His wolf clawed and raged and demanded. His pride, quieter, colder, hissed don't you dare. And his heart, the part of him that still bled in dreams he couldn't control, whispered the cruelest truth. If you let her walk away again without knowing why she left, you'll regret it until your last breath. The bonfire crackled. Someone laughed nearby. A child shrieked in delight, chasing another through the snow. Garrick, his second in command, materialized at his shoulder. Alpha. The word came carefully, like approaching a wolf caught in a trap. Kalen didn't answer. Couldn't force words past the stranglehold on his throat. His second followed his line of sight, tracking Mireya's retreating form as she moved farther from the gathering's warmth and light. Should I? Garrick started. No. The word came out rough, barely controlled. But even as Kalen said it, his wolf was calculating. Because pregnant Lunas didn't sever mate bonds without reason. And if someone had threatened her, if someone had made her believe she needed to face this alone, if someone had hurt her. His claws extended involuntarily, carving shallow grooves into his palms. Blood welled, dark against his skin. Around them, conversations were dying. Wolves who'd been laughing moments ago now stood silent, watching their alpha with the kind of tension that preceded either violence or breakdown. The pack could feel his emotional state bleeding through the collective bond that tied every Northridge wolf to their king. Elder Morvain approached from the high circle, his ancient face creased with concern. "Kaelin," he said, dropping all formality. "What is it?" Kaelin's jaw worked. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an edge that made nearby wolves step back instinctively. "That was Mireia. I saw. She's pregnant." Morvain's expression shifted, surprise, then understanding, then something that looked disturbingly like guilt. "How far along?" "Far enough that I should have known." Kaelin turned to face the elder, and whatever Morvain saw in his eyes made the old wolf's breath catch. "Far enough that she was carrying my child when she asked for severance. Far enough that someone convinced her walking away was safer than staying." The gathering had gone completely silent now. Every wolf present could hear their alpha's words, could scent the dangerous cocktail of grief and rage radiating from him. Garrick spoke quietly. "You want me to bring her back?" "No." Kaelin forced the word out. "She left for a reason. She chose severance for a reason. And until I know what that reason was, I won't force her into anything." "But she's on our territory. She came to the winter gathering. That means she's not running anymore." Kaelin's hands slowly unclenched, healing already closing the claw marks. "Post guards on the forest path. Distant. Unobtrusive. I want to know which cabin she's staying in, if she's alone, if she needs anything. But no one approaches her without my direct order." Garrick nodded once and melted into the crowd. Kaelin stood rooted as the gathering slowly, cautiously resumed around him. Wolves giving him wide berth, speaking in hushed tones, casting glances toward the forest path where Mireia had disappeared. Morvain remained. "The severance ritual," the elder said slowly. "I've been meaning to speak with you about it." Kaelin's attention snapped to him. "What about it?" "Something's been wrong since that night. The bond should be completely severed, clean, absolute, painless." Morvain's weathered hand gripped his ceremonial staff tighter. "But I've been sensing residual energy. Like the ritual didn't take the way it should have." Ice slid down Kaelin's spine. "Explain." "Either I performed it incorrectly, which after 2 centuries of practice, I doubt, or someone tampered with the ritual components." The elder's eyes met his. "I think your bond was suppressed, not severed. Buried, not broken." Kaelin's wolf surged again, but this time with something closer to hope than rage. If the bond wasn't truly severed, if Mireia could still feel him the way phantom sensations sometimes ghosted across his awareness in dreams. "Find out," Kaelin commanded. "Review everything. Every component, every witness, every wolf who had access to the ritual circle beforehand. And if I find evidence of sabotage." Kaelin's smile was cold enough to frost the air between them. "Then someone is going to learn why you don't interfere with an alpha's mate bond." He turned toward the forest path one final time. Somewhere in those winter woods, Mireia was settling into a cabin, alone, carrying his daughter, believing she'd made the right choice by cutting him out. She was wrong. But proving that, earning back her trust without commanding it, protecting her without caging her, being the mate she'd needed him to be before everything fell apart, that would require more restraint than any battle he'd ever fought. The pack watched their alpha finally move, walking not toward the forest, but toward his own quarters. Controlled. Deliberate. Every inch the king they followed. But his wolf was already hunting, tracking, planning. And Kaelin Thorne had never failed a hunt in his life. Kaelin's quarters felt too large. Too empty. The fire in the stone hearth did nothing to warm the cold that had settled into his bones the moment Mireia disappeared into the trees. He stood at the window, staring at the forest edge, and let the memories come. There was no fighting them tonight. 3 months ago, the ritual circle had been drawn in silver ash under a moonless sky. Traditional. Absolute. Final. Elder Morvain stood at the center, ceremonial blade gleaming in torchlight, his voice carrying the weight of ancient pack law. "Mireia Ashwood, Luna of Northridge, do you come before the pack of your own free will to request severance of the mate bond?" She'd stood across from Kaelin, 20 feet of sacred ground between them that might as well have been an ocean. Her face was carved from stone. Beautiful. Unreachable. Destroying him with every breath. "I do," she said. Clear. Unwavering. The pack had filled the surrounding forest, witnesses required by law. Kaelin heard their confusion, their shock rippling through the collective bond. Mireia was beloved. Strong. The kind of Luna who fought beside her warriors and negotiated trade treaties with the same fierce intelligence. No one understood why she wanted this. Kaelin had understood even less. And you, Kaelin Thorne, Alpha King of Northridge, do you consent to this severance? He should have said no. Should have demanded answers, invoked his right as Alpha to refuse, forced her to explain why she'd grown so distant, why she flinched when he touched her, why she locked herself in separate quarters and wouldn't meet his eyes anymore. But he'd made her a promise the night he claimed her as mate. I will never cage you. Whatever you need, whatever you choose, I will honor it. So he'd said the only word that felt like dying. Yes. The blade had cut through moon water and ritual herbs. Morvain spoke words in the old language, and Kaelin felt it. The golden thread that had bound him to Mireia since the moment their bond snapped into place, fraying, weakening, finally breaking with a snap that dropped him to one knee. Mireia had remained standing. Perfectly still. If she felt pain, she didn't show it. The pack had howled, not in celebration, but in mourning. You didn't sever a true mate bond. It was an abomination against destiny itself. But it was done. Mireia had walked away that night without looking back. And Kaelin had let her, because he'd promised, and because he didn't know how to fight an enemy he couldn't see. Before that, 2 years earlier, the first time Kaelin saw Mireia, she'd been arguing with his head warrior about border patrol rotations. Your strategy leaves the Eastern Ridge exposed, she'd said, pointing at the map with zero deference to the fact that she was addressing one of the most decorated wolves in Northridge. Any alpha with basic tactical knowledge could exploit that gap. Garrick had bristled. And you are? Mireia Ashwood. Silverpaw Pack. Here for the treaty negotiations. She'd looked up then, noticed Kaelin watching from the doorway, and met his gaze without flinching. Your border security is sloppy, Alpha King. If I were planning an invasion, I'd have 3 strike teams through that ridge before your scouts knew what hit them. The bond had slammed into place so hard Kaelin's wolf had nearly torn through his skin right there in the war room. Mate. She'd felt it too, her eyes widening, breath catching. But instead of submission or fear or the usual flustered response, she'd smiled. Sharp. Challenging. Well, she'd said. This complicates the negotiations. Kaelin had laughed. Actually laughed. He'd claimed her 3 nights later under the full moon with the pack's roaring approval, and married her in a human ceremony a month after that because she'd wanted both. The marriage. 2 years of partnership he'd thought was unbreakable. Mireia reformed the pack's healer training, established trade routes with 5 neighboring territories, fought beside him when rogues tested their borders. She was fierce and brilliant and never backed down from challenging him when she thought he was wrong. The pack loved her. Not because she was Luna, because she earned it. Kaelin had loved her because she was his equal in every way that mattered. The unraveling. It started 6 months before the severance. Small things first. Mireia pulling away when he reached for her in sleep. Conversations ending in silence instead of resolution. A distance growing between them that he couldn't bridge no matter what he tried. Then the nightmares. He'd wake to find her sitting by the window, shaking, refusing to tell him what she'd dreamed. It's nothing, she'd say. Go back to sleep. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. And it was destroying them. The final month, she'd moved to separate quarters. Said she needed space. Kaelin had given it, thinking she'd come back when she was ready. She came back with a request for severance instead. Present. A knock pulled Kaelin from the memories. He didn't turn from the window. Enter. Garrick stepped inside, closing the door quietly. I have the information you requested. Tell me. She's staying in the old healer's cabin. Eastern edge of the territory, about 2 miles from the main compound. Garrick moved to stand beside him, following his gaze toward the dark forest. The cabin was abandoned for years, but someone's made it livable. Firewood stacked, herb garden planted, defensive wards in place. She's been here for weeks, Kaelin said. Not a question. 2 weeks, according to the border patrol logs. She registered her presence formally, gave her name, stated her intention to stay through winter, requested minimal contact with the pack. Garrick hesitated. She's alone, Alpha. No mate. No guards. No one helping her except. Except some of the pack females have been bringing her supplies. Quietly. Food, blankets, healing herbs. They haven't told anyone because they thought you'd. He trailed off. Thought I'd what? Forbid them from helping a pregnant wolf. Kaylin's voice came out harsher than he intended. Thought you'd be angry she came back without telling you. Kaylin's hands clenched on the windowsill. I'm not angry she came back. I'm angry she felt she had to hide. Garrick was quiet for a moment. The pregnancy timing. 5 months. Maybe more. Kaylin's jaw tightened. She was pregnant when she asked for severance. When she stood in that circle and severed our bond, she was carrying my daughter. His second went very still. You're certain it's yours? Kaylin's wolf snarled at the question. Yes. Then why would she? That's what I need to find out. Kaylin finally turned from the window. But not by forcing her. Not by using my authority as alpha. If I corner her, if I command answers, I'll lose her completely. So what's your play? Kaylin moved toward the door. I'm going to do what I should have done 6 months ago. I'm going to ask her what she needs. And this time, I'm going to actually listen. It's past midnight, Alpha. Maybe wait until. She's alone in a cabin at the edge of our territory, pregnant, with minimal protection. Kaylin's eyes flashed wolf gold. I've waited 3 months already. I'm not waiting another night. He was out the door before Garrick could object, shifting mid-stride as he hit the forest path. His wolf surged forward, powerful and silent, following Mireya's scent through winter woods like a compass pointing home. The bond might be severed. But his wolf had never forgotten the way to its mate. And tonight, Kaylin Thorne was done pretending he could live without answers. The forest opened to a small clearing, and Kaylin's wolf slowed to a predatory prowl. Moonlight painted everything silver, the snow, the pine branches heavy with ice, and the cabin that sat like a secret at the edge of his world. Small. Weathered wood with moss growing between the logs. But maintained. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, carrying the scent of burning cedar and something else, herbs he recognized from the healer's stores. Lavender. Chamomile. Motherwort. Pregnancy herbs. His wolf circled the perimeter, reading the scene with predatory precision. Firewood stacked too neatly along the eastern wall, split logs in perfect rows that would have taken hours of labor. No pregnant wolf did that alone. Defensive wards hung from the eaves, bundles of rowan and iron, protection magic against malicious spirits and unwanted shifters. She'd been preparing. Building a sanctuary. Making herself safe in a way that said she'd expected to need it. Fresh footprints in the snow led from the cabin to a small root cellar dug into the hillside. Multiple sets, Mireya's distinct gait, shorter stride now that she was carrying extra weight, and several other prints. Female wolves. The ones Garrick mentioned who'd been helping her. His wolf growled low. Not at them, at himself. At the fact that his mate had needed help and he hadn't known. That she'd been here for 2 weeks, alone, vulnerable, and he'd been going through the motions of leadership while she built a life without him. He shifted back to human form at the tree line, the cold biting into bare skin. He'd run without clothes, without planning, driven purely by instinct. Now he stood there like a fool, naked in the snow, staring at a cabin where his pregnant ex-Luna was probably asleep. Smart, Kaylin. Very controlled. He grabbed the emergency cash he kept hidden near the border patrol station, rough canvas pants, nothing else, and pulled them on. Then he approached the cabin like he was negotiating hostile territory. The closer he got, the stronger her scent became. Mireya. Pine and winter sage and something new, sweeter, rounder. The pregnancy had changed her scent signature, adding layers his wolf recognized as daughter, pup, protect. He stopped 3 feet from the door. His hand raised to knock, then hesitated. What was he doing? It was past midnight. She was pregnant, probably exhausted, definitely not interested in seeing the alpha who'd signed severance papers and let her walk away 3 months ago. But the alternative, walking away, waiting until morning, pretending he could sleep knowing she was here, was impossible. He knocked. Softly. 3 measured taps that wouldn't scare her but couldn't be ignored. Silence. Then movement inside. Careful footsteps. The sound of metal sliding, a bolt lock, recently installed. More protection. More preparation for threats he didn't understand yet. Her voice came through the wood, muffled but clear. Go away, Kaylin. She knew it was him. Of course she did. Even with the bond severed, even with wards and distance and 3 months of separation, she recognized him. I need to talk to you, he said. Kept his voice low, non-threatening. The voice he used in negotiations, not the alpha command that could compel obedience. No, you don't. Mireya. The bond is severed. You have no claim here. Each word was a blade, precise and cutting. Whatever you think you need, you're wrong. Go back to the pack house. Kaylin's jaw clenched. Every dominant instinct in his body screamed at him to kick down the door, to demand she let him in, to take control of a situation that felt like sand slipping through his fingers. But he remembered the look in her eyes in the ritual circle. The exhaustion. The fear she'd hidden beneath stone-faced calm. If he forced this, he'd prove whatever fear had driven her away was justified. So Kaylin did something he'd never done publicly, never done in front of any wolf, never even considered doing in his entire reign as Alpha King. He knelt. Dropped to his knees in the snow outside her door, where the window would give her a clear line of sight, and bowed his head. I'm not here to claim anything, he said to the frozen ground. I'm here to ask. Please. The silence stretched so long he thought she wouldn't respond. Then he heard it, the sharp intake of breath. The sound of footsteps moving closer to the window. She was watching. Seeing her alpha kneel like a supplicant, like a wolf without rank, like a male who had nothing left but honesty. The door opened. Not wide. Just enough for her to stand in the gap, backlit by firelight that toned her silhouette golden. One hand rested on her belly, protective, instinctive. The other gripped the door frame like she was holding back a flood. She looked down at him, and something flickered in her eyes. Not forgiveness. Not love. Just bone-deep exhaustion and surprise that he'd actually done it. One conversation, she said finally. Her voice was steady, but he heard the tremor underneath. Then you leave. You don't send guards, you don't send gifts, you don't send messengers. One conversation, and then you respect my choice to be here alone. Kaylin rose slowly, carefully. Met her eyes and saw the woman he'd married, fierce, unbreakable, terrified. One conversation. She stepped back. He entered. And the door closed behind them like a sealed tomb. The cabin's interior was exactly what he'd expected and nothing like he'd imagined. Small main room with a stone fireplace crackling cheerfully. A hand-carved table with 2 mismatched chairs. Bundles of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling beams. A narrow staircase leading to what must be a sleeping loft. And everywhere, small signs of preparation for the child. A cradle half-finished near the fire, carved from ash wood. Baby blankets folded on a shelf. A small stack of leather-bound books about pregnancy and childbirth, some with pages marked. She'd been building a life. A future. Without him. Mireya moved to the fire but didn't sit. Didn't invite him to sit. Just stood there with the flames painting shadows across her face, one hand never leaving her belly. Kaylin stayed near the door. Giving her space. Proving he could be trusted not to crowd her. How far along? He asked. Mireya's gaze stayed on the fire. 5 months. The math was immediate, devastating. 5 months meant conception happened before the distance started, before the nightmares, before whatever fear had driven her to severance. 5 months meant she'd stood in the ritual circle knowing she carried his child and chose to cut the bond anyway. Why didn't you tell me? The question came out rougher than he intended. Because telling you would have made it real. It is real, Mireya. She finally looked at him, and her eyes were ancient with exhaustion. Not for you. Not anymore. What's that supposed to mean? It means you signed the severance papers. You agreed to end us. You watched me walk away and you let me go. Her voice didn't rise, didn't break. Somehow that made it worse. The bond is gone. I don't owe you explanations about what I do with my body or my life. Kaylin's hands clenched. That's my child. That's my child, Mireya corrected, voice sharp as broken glass. Who happens to share your genetics? But you severed your claim to anything beyond that. I severed the bond because you asked me to. The words exploded out of him. You stood in front of the entire pack and requested severance, And I agreed because you wanted it, because I'd promised never to cage you, because I thought. He stopped. Swallowed hard. Thought what? Mireia asked quietly. Thought you'd come back when you were ready. His voice dropped. Thought whatever was scaring you would pass, and you'd remember we were stronger together than apart. Mireia's hand tightened on her belly. I didn't come back. You're here now. Not for you. The words hit like a physical blow. Kalen absorbed them, forced himself to stay still, to keep breathing. Then why? Why come back to Northridge territory? Why stay in a cabin 2 miles from the pack house if you wanted nothing to do with me? Mireia turned back to the fire. Long silence. Then, because staying would have killed this child. Kalen went completely still. Explain. No. Mireia. You asked why I left. I told you. She looked at him over her shoulder. That's all you're getting tonight. Kalen's wolf clawed at his insides, demanding answers, demanding action. But he forced it down, forced himself to stay still even though every instinct screamed at him to close the distance between them and shake the truth loose. Someone threatened you, he said. Not a question. A certainty that settled into his bones like ice. Mireia didn't answer. Just stared at the fire like it held secrets she couldn't speak aloud. Someone threatened our child, and instead of coming to me, instead of letting me protect you, you severed our bond and disappeared. Kalen's voice was carefully controlled, but fury bled through the edges. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Watching you request severance with no explanation, no warning, nothing but silence. Yes. The word was barely a whisper. I know exactly what it did. Because it destroyed me too. The admission cracked something open in Kalen's chest. He took one step forward. Just one. Then help me understand. Tell me who threatened you. Tell me what they said. Tell me why you thought running was safer than trusting your mate to keep you alive. Mireia's shoulders tensed. Because you couldn't keep me safe. Not from this. You don't know that. I do know that. She spun to face him, and for the first time, her armor fractured. Raw fear flashed in her eyes. Because they knew things, Kalen. Private things. Things only someone close to us could know. They knew about the territory dispute with Shadowfang. They knew about the trade negotiations I was handling. They knew, her voice broke. They knew I was pregnant before I'd even confirmed it myself. Kalen's blood went cold. What exactly did they say? Mireia wrapped her arms around herself, protective and small in a way that made his wolf howl. Letters. No scent, no signature. The first one came 2 months before the severance. It said, the bond makes the child vulnerable. Enemies will use the heir against the alpha. Sever it and disappear, or watch your daughter die before she's born. Daughter. The word slipped out. Confirmation of what his wolf had already known, and it hit him like a blessing and a curse combined. Mireia's hand moved to her belly instinctively. Yes. Kalen's mind was racing, cataloging, analyzing. How many letters? 5. Each one more specific than the last. Describing how they'd do it. Poison, ambush, ritual magic that would stop her heart in the womb. She spoke clinically now, like reciting a report, but her hands shook. The last one came the day before I requested severance. It said if I didn't cut the bond within 48 hours, they'd kill her and make me watch. Every dominant protective instinct in Kalen's body erupted. His claws extended. His eyes flashed wolf gold. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as his wolf surged so close to the surface that Mireia took an involuntary step back. He saw it, the fear flicker across her face, and forced himself still. Breathed. Counted. Pulled the wolf back by sheer force of will. I'm not angry at you, he managed. His voice came out graveled, barely human. I'm angry at whoever made you so afraid you thought destroying us was the only option. Mireia's chin lifted. It was the only option. The bond made her vulnerable. They said enemies could track her through our connection, could use mate bond magic too. That's not how mate bonds work. Kalen took another careful step forward. Whoever told you that was lying. Mate bonds protect children. They make them stronger, not weaker. Every wolf knows that. I couldn't risk it. Her voice cracked. I couldn't risk her life on what every wolf supposedly knows. What if they were right? What if staying bonded made her a target? So you made yourself a target instead. Kaylin gestured at the cabin, at her isolation. You're alone, pregnant, living at the edge of pack territory with minimal protection. If someone wanted to hurt you now, you'd be defenseless. I have wards. Wards won't stop a determined wolf. I have a silver dagger under my pillow and wolfsbane extract in the root cellar. I'm not helpless. Kaylin stared at her, his brilliant, fierce mate who'd fought beside him in territorial skirmishes, who'd once taken down a rogue wolf twice her size, reduced to hiding in a cabin with improvised weapons because someone had weaponized her fear. This isn't living, Mireya. This is surviving. Barely. Surviving is enough, she said. As long as she survives, nothing else matters. The absolute conviction in her voice broke something in him. This was what he'd failed to see 6 months ago when she started pulling away. Not rejection. Not falling out of love. Terror so profound she'd amputate her own soul to protect their child. He wanted to rage. Wanted to tear apart the forest hunting whoever had done this. But Mireya was watching him with careful eyes, waiting to see if he'd prove her fears right by losing control. So Kaylin did the hardest thing he'd ever done. He stepped back. Gave her space. Let his claws retract and his eyes fade to human brown. I won't force you to tell me anything else, he said quietly. But I'm not leaving you unprotected. I don't need. You're carrying my daughter in a cabin with no guards at the edge of my territory. That's not negotiable. He held up a hand before she could argue. Not because I'm claiming you. Not because the bond gives me rights. Because you're a pregnant wolf in Northridge territory, and every pregnant wolf deserves protection. That's pack law, Mireya. You know that. Her jaw clenched. She wanted to argue, he could see it. But she also knew he was right. 2 guards, she said finally. Distant. I don't want them inside the wards. I don't want them reporting my every movement. Just, perimeter surveillance. Agreed. And you don't come back here without permission. That one hurt. But Kaylin nodded. Agreed. Mireya searched his face like she was looking for the trap, the manipulation, the moment he'd revert to alpha commands. When she didn't find it, something in her shoulders loosened. Just slightly. Why? She asked. Why are you agreeing so easily? The Kaylin I knew would have posted a full security detail and damn my preferences. The Kaylin you knew was an idiot who thought protection meant control. He met her eyes. I'm trying to be better. Trying to be the mate you needed me to be before everything fell apart. Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the windows. Then Mireya spoke, so quietly he almost missed it. It's a girl. Kaylin's breath stopped. You said that. In the letter. I found out 2 weeks ago. The pack healer confirmed it. Her hand spread protectively over her belly. She's strong. Active. Kicks like she's already training to be a warrior. Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the impossible distance between them, Kaylin felt something fierce and joyful surge through his chest. A daughter. His daughter. Growing stronger every day despite the threats and the severed bond and all the ways he'd failed to protect them both. Does she have a name? He asked. Mireya's expression shifted. Became something raw and devastating. Not yet. Why not? She looked away. I was waiting to see if I'd survive long enough to give her one. The words hit like a blade between his ribs. Kaylin moved without thinking, closing the distance between them in 2 strides. He didn't touch her, knew she'd bolt if he did, but he positioned himself close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. You will survive, he said. Voice low, absolute, carrying every ounce of alpha command he possessed. Our daughter will be born healthy and strong. And whoever threatened you will answer to me. That's not a promise, Mireya. It's a vow. Tears gathered in her eyes but didn't fall. You can't know that. I know I'll burn down anyone who tries to hurt you. I know I'll hunt whoever sent those letters until there's nothing left but ash and regret. And I know, his voice cracked. I know I failed you once by not seeing how afraid you were. I won't fail you again. A single tear tracked down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily, like emotions were enemies to be defeated. You should go, she whispered. Before I start believing you. Kaelan wanted to stay. Wanted to plant himself by her fire and refused to leave until she felt safe again. But he'd made a promise. One conversation, then respect her boundaries. So he stepped back. Moved toward the door. His hand on the handle, he paused. The guards will be posted by dawn. If you need anything, anything at all, send word. Mireya nodded. Didn't speak. Kaelan opened the door to winter cold and moonlight. Stepped onto the porch. Started to leave. Kaelan. He turned. She stood framed in the doorway, firelight behind her, one hand on her belly. Thank you, she said. For not forcing this. For not being who I was afraid you'd be. His throat tightened. I'm trying. I know. She almost smiled. Almost. It's more than I expected. The door closed. The bolt slid home. And Kaelan stood in the snow, shaking, realizing the full scope of what he was facing. Someone had terrorized his mate so thoroughly she'd chosen to destroy their bond rather than trust him to keep her safe. Someone had threatened his unborn daughter and made Mireya believe isolation was survival. His wolf stopped its anguished howling. Started calculating. Planning. Hunting. Because whoever had sent those letters had made one critical mistake. They'd left Mireya alive. And alive meant she could identify them. Meant the threat was still out there, still watching, still waiting. Kaelan shifted and ran back toward the pack house, his mind already assembling the pieces. The letters. The timing. The intimate knowledge they displayed. This wasn't some outside enemy. This was betrayal from within. And before his daughter was born, he'd tear the truth from whoever had dared threaten his family. Dawn broke cold and merciless. Kaelan hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in his office, reviewing security logs, pack rosters, and every wolf who'd had access to him and Mireya during the months before the severance. The threatening letters meant someone close. Someone with intimate knowledge of pack business, territorial disputes, Mireya's pregnancy before it was public knowledge. That list was disturbingly short. Garrick entered without knocking, carrying 2 mugs of coffee that smelled strong enough to strip paint. You look like hell, Alpha. I feel worse. Kaelan accepted the mug, drained half of it in one swallow. Call a council meeting. Inner circle only. 1 hour. His second's expression sharpened. What are we discussing? Treason. The council room filled quickly. Kaelan's inner circle, the wolves he trusted most, took their positions around the war table. Garrick to his right. Elder Morvain at the head. 3 senior warriors. 2 advisors who handled pack finances and external relations. And Serena Blackwood. She entered last, moving with practiced grace. Beautiful in the way predators were beautiful, sharp cheekbones, ice blue eyes, silver blonde hair that caught the morning light. She wore traditional council attire, dark leather vest, ceremonial blade at her hip, the silver paw pack crest embroidered on her collar. She'd been living in Northridge for 8 months as part of the Alliance Treaty, a diplomatic liaison meant to strengthen bonds between their packs. In practice, she'd positioned herself as indispensable. Attending every council meeting, offering strategic advice, making herself visible and valuable. Making herself a potential future Luna. Kaelan watched her take her seat across from him, and something cold slithered down his spine. He'd never encouraged her interest. Never given her reason to believe he'd consider a political match after Mireya. But Serena had the patience of a hunter and the ambition of an alpha herself. Thank you for gathering on short notice, Kaelan began. I'm announcing something the pack will learn officially at tonight's gathering, but you need to know first. Every wolf in the room went still, attentive. Mireya is pregnant. 5 months along. The child is mine, an heir to Northridge. He let that sink in. Watched reactions carefully. Despite the severance, I'm extending full lunar protection to her. Guards will be posted at her residence. Any wolf who approaches her without permission answers to me directly. Garrick nodded, unsurprised. The elder looked thoughtful. The warriors exchanged glances but said nothing. Serena's reaction was more subtle. A flicker of something behind her eyes, calculation, perhaps frustration, before her face smoothed into perfect diplomatic neutrality. A child is a blessing, she said carefully. The pack will celebrate the news of an heir. Will they? The question came from one of the advisors, an older she-wolf named Tessu. Forgive my bluntness, Alpha, but the bond was severed publicly, witnessed by the entire pack. If Mireia carries your child but is no longer your mate. She hesitated. Succession law is unclear in these circumstances. The child is my blood, Kaelin said flatly. That makes her legitimate heir regardless of bond status. Blood alone doesn't guarantee succession rights, Serena interjected smoothly. Not when the mother isn't recognized, Luna. There's historical precedent for challenges to heirs born outside of active mate bonds. I'm not saying it's right, just that it could become complicated. The words were silk wrapped around poison. She wasn't making a threat. Just raising a concern that would plant doubt in other wolves' minds. Garrick's jaw clenched. The Alpha's bloodline doesn't require a bond to be legitimate. Any wolf who challenges that challenges the Alpha himself. Of course, Serena said quickly. I'm simply concerned for the child's protection. Rivals might use the technicality to create political instability. Kaelin's eyes locked on hers. Then those rivals will learn why creating instability in my pack is a fatal mistake. Silence fell. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Elder Morvain cleared his throat. If I may, Alpha, there's a related matter we need to discuss. About the severance ritual itself. Kaelin's attention snapped to him. Go on. I've been conducting a review of the ritual components, as you requested. The elder's weathered hands spread a scroll across the table. The severance should have been absolute. Clean. Painless. But I've been sensing residual bond energy for months. At first, I thought it was natural, phantom sensations that fade with time. But it's not fading. If anything, it's strengthening. What are you saying? Garrick asked. I'm saying the ritual was compromised. Morvain's finger traced symbols on the scroll. The moon water was tainted with wolfsbane, not enough to be obvious, but enough to corrupt the magical properties. The ritual circle had blood magic sigils hidden beneath the silver ash. Someone sabotaged the severance to suppress the bond rather than sever it completely. The council erupted in overlapping voices. Garrick demanded names. The warriors exchanged alarmed glances. Tessie looked horrified. Serena remained perfectly still, face unreadable. Kaelin held up a hand for silence. Who had access to the ritual components before the ceremony? Myself and my apprentice prepared the moon water and herbs, Morvain said. The silver ash for the circle was gathered by. He consulted his notes. 3 volunteers from the pack. The ceremonial blade was kept in the sacred armory. Dozens of wolves have keys. I want names. Every wolf who touched any component. Every wolf who was in the ritual chamber in the 48 hours before the ceremony. Kaelin's voice was arctic. Someone deliberately corrupted my mate bond. I want to know who, and I want to know why. This could take weeks to investigate properly, Tessie said. Then you have weeks. Start now. The council filed out slowly, wolves exchanging worried whispers. Serena lingered, approaching Kaelin as the room emptied. Alpha, if I may, this revelation about sabotage is concerning. Have you considered that whoever did this might have had good intentions? Kaelin's eyes were cold as winter stone. Explain. The bond suppression rather than true severance could have been protective. If Mireia was in danger, if enemies were targeting her through the mate bond. You seem well versed in theories about mate bond vulnerabilities, Kaelin observed. Any particular reason? Serena's smile didn't waver. I study pack law and magical theory. It's part of my role as liaison. I'm simply suggesting that before you hunt for traitors, consider whether someone might have been trying to protect your Luna in the only way they could. Mireia didn't need protection from our bond. She needed protection from whoever convinced her our bond was a threat. He stepped closer, invading her space with deliberate alpha dominance. And when I find that wolf, their intentions won't matter. Only their punishment. Serena held his gaze a beat too long, challenging, testing. Then she lowered her eyes in submission and left. Garrick remained, waiting until they were alone. You think it's her? I think she's too interested in succession law and mate bond vulnerabilities for someone who claims to only study theory. Kaelin moved to the window. Put surveillance on her. Quietly. I want to know everywhere she goes, everyone she talks to, every letter she sends. And Mireia? Does she know about the sabotage? Not yet. But she needs to. Kaylin's hands clenched on the windowsill. If the bond was only suppressed, that means. He didn't finish. Couldn't. That means it can be restored, Garrick said quietly. If she consents. If. The biggest word in any language. Mireia's cabin, same morning. Mireia stood at her work table, studying the journal she'd kept hidden for months. Leather-bound, filled with her neat handwriting documenting everything. Dates the letters arrived. Exact wording of each threat. Times she'd felt watched. Moments where coincidences seemed too convenient. She'd been tracking her stalker the only way she knew how, through pattern analysis and careful observation. 3 entries caught her attention now, viewed through the lens of being back in pack territory. Month 4, saw a she-wolf watching from the tree line during my morning walk. Silver blonde hair. Gone when I looked again. Month 5, supply delivery from pack stores included herbs I didn't order. Motherwort and raspberry leaf, pregnancy herbs. No one should know yet. Month 6, the 5th letter referenced a conversation I had with Kaylin in our private quarters. No one else was present. Either someone has listening magic, or someone Kaylin trusted had access she didn't suspect. Mireia's hand rested on her belly. Her daughter kicked, strong, insistent, demanding her mother pay attention. I know, little one, she whispered. We're not safe yet. She pulled out a blank page and began writing a new entry. Returned to Northridge territory. Kaylin knows about pregnancy. Reacted as expected, protective, demanding answers, but showed restraint. Progress? Need to investigate. Who prepared severance ritual? Who had access to our quarters during final months? Why does Serena Blackwood keep appearing in my peripheral vision? A knock at the door made her jump. She closed the journal, slid it into its hiding spot beneath a loose floorboard, and grabbed the silver dagger before approaching. Identify yourself, she called. Tessie Ironwood, Luna. I've brought supplies. Mireia recognized the name, one of Kaylin's council members, a she-wolf who'd always treated her with respect. She opened the door carefully. Tessie stood on the porch with a basket of food and healing herbs. Her expression was warm but worried. The Alpha ordered full provisions for you. May I enter? Mireia stepped aside. Watched as Tessie unpacked fresh bread, dried meat, fruits preserved in honey, and several pouches of medicinal tea. You don't have to do this, Mireia said. The Alpha commanded it. But honestly. Tessie smiled. I'd do it regardless. You were good to this pack, Luna. We haven't forgotten. The title, Luna, hit harder than it should. Mireia wasn't Luna anymore. The bond was severed. But old loyalties apparently died harder than magical connections. Did Kaylin tell the council? Mireia asked. About the pregnancy? Yes. This morning. Tessie's expression shifted. Also about the ritual sabotage. Mireia went very still. What sabotage? The severance ritual was corrupted. The bond wasn't truly severed, just suppressed. Elder Morvain is investigating who had access to the components. Tessie's eyes met hers with careful sympathy. You didn't know. No. Mireia's mind raced. Suppressed, not severed. Which meant whoever threatened her had lied about how mate bonds worked. Had manipulated her into requesting severance based on false information. Had known exactly what to say to make her destroy the one thing that might have actually protected her daughter. Who's investigating? Mireia asked. The Alpha has the entire council looking into it. But between you and me. Tessie lowered her voice. Watch Serena Blackwood. That she-wolf has been positioning herself for Luna status since the severance. And she asked some very pointed questions this morning about succession law and heirs born outside active bonds. Ice slid down Mireia's spine. Silver blonde hair. Always in the peripheral vision. Access to pack politics and private information. Thank you, Mireia said quietly. For the warning. And the supplies. Tessie nodded and left, pulling her cloak tight against the cold. Mireia closed the door, bolted it, and returned to her journal. Pulled it from its hiding place and wrote with shaking hands. Serena Blackwood. Silver blonde hair matches the watcher. Council access explains information leaks. Motive, eliminate me, position herself as new Luna, delegitimize the heir. She sent the letters. I'm almost certain. But I need proof. And I need to stay alive long enough to expose her. Her daughter kicked again, harder this time. Like she was agreeing. Like she was saying fight. Mireia pressed her hand to her belly and made a silent vow. Whoever had threatened her child would answer for it. Even if it meant walking into danger. Even if it meant trusting Kaylin again. Even if it meant risking everything on the hope that destiny hadn't abandoned them after all. 1 week passed like a held breath. Kaylin maintained distance from Mireia's cabin, honoring his promise. But the guards he'd posted reported everything. She was healthy, active, preparing obsessively for the child's arrival. And watching the forest like she expected an attack. The investigation into the ritual sabotage moved slowly. Too slowly. Morvain's list of wolves with access numbered 37. Narrowing it required interviews, magical testing, careful observation that couldn't be rushed without tipping off the saboteur. Meanwhile, Serena remained visible, helpful, perfectly positioned. If she knew she was under suspicion, she gave no indication. Then came the second winter gathering, the traditional alliance renewal ceremony where neighboring pacts confirmed treaties and settled disputes. Neutral ground. Sacred law. And the perfect stage for political theater. Kaylin stood at the center of the ceremonial grounds as visiting alphas arrived with their delegations. Shadowfang pack from the eastern mountains. Riverside wolves from the southern territories. And Silverpaw, Serena's home pack, led by her father, Alpha Darius Blackwood. The air thrummed with dominance displays and careful diplomacy. Wolves in formal attire, weapons ceremonial but functional, alliances tested through subtle positioning and strategic conversations. Mireia was absent. She'd refused the invitation, citing exhaustion and preference for privacy. Kaylin had reluctantly accepted, though his wolf hated having her outside the gathering's protective circle. The ceremony began with traditional offerings. Alphas spoke blessings for the coming season. Treaties were renewed with ritual wine and shared hunts. Everything proceeded with practiced formality. Until Serena stood. She moved to the center of the circle with confident grace, her voice carrying across the gathered wolves. Alpha Kaylin, honored guests, I invoke the right of formal grievance under pack law. Every conversation died. Grievances during alliance ceremonies were rare, serious, and binding. Whatever accusation came next would have to be addressed publicly, with all assembled packs as witnesses. Kaylin's wolf bristled, but he kept his voice neutral. State your grievance. It concerns the legitimacy of the claimed heir to Northridge. Serena's expression was perfectly sympathetic, concerned rather than accusatory. Recent announcements indicate a child will be born to Mireia Ashwood, who is no longer Luna due to formal bond severance. Questions have arisen about the child's parentage and succession rights. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Visiting wolves exchanged glances. This was pack politics at its most dangerous. Succession disputes could fracture alliances and trigger challenges for alpha status. Kaylin's voice dropped to a lethal rumble. The child is mine. That's not a question. With respect, Alpha, it is a question when evidence suggests otherwise. Serena gestured, and 2 wolves stepped forward carrying a leather satchel. I've been conducting my own investigation, concerned for Northridge stability. What I found troubles me deeply. She opened the satchel and withdrew several items. Letters, aged parchment with feminine handwriting. Correspondence allegedly written by Mireia to an unknown male, referencing intimate encounters during the months before severance. The content suggests. She paused delicately. A relationship outside the mate bond. Garrick snarled from Kaylin's left. Warriors shifted, hands moving to weapons. But Serena continued, unruffled. Additionally, testimony from a traveling merchant. She indicated a wolf Kaylin didn't recognize, standing nervously at the circle's edge. Who claims to have seen Mireia in the company of a strange male at a trading post 3 months ago. Their interaction appeared familiar. That's a lie, Garrick bit out. It's testimony given under witness law, Serena countered. And there's more. Blood magic analysis conducted by a neutral healer detected traces of conception magic, spells used to ensure pregnancy with a specific partner, often employed when natural conception fails. Her ice blue eyes found Kaylin's. If the child was conceived through artificial means with another male's essence, she cannot be legitimate heir under Northridge succession law. The gathered wolves erupted. Visiting alphas demanded clarification. Northridge warriors shouted denials. The ceremony dissolved into chaos. Kaylin stood frozen, every muscle locked in the effort of not shifting and tearing Serena's throat out where she stood. Because he recognized what she was doing, creating reasonable doubt, planting seeds of illegitimacy that would follow his daughter for her entire life, positioning herself as the concerned ally just asking questions. It was brilliant. Vicious. And if he reacted with violence, he'd confirm that she'd struck a nerve. Alpha Darius stepped forward, raising a hand for silence. These are serious accusations, Serena. You have proof. I have evidence that raises questions requiring answers. She turned to Kaylin. For the good of the Alliance and Northridge stability, I formally request verification of the child's parentage through Sacred Moon Trial. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Moon trials were ancient, absolute, and dangerous. Ancestral magic that revealed truth but demanded a price, usually pain, sometimes blood. Occasionally life itself. For a pregnant wolf to undergo one risked both mother and child. It was also completely legal. Any wolf could call for moon trial when legitimacy was questioned. And once called, refusing meant automatic assumption of guilt. Serena had boxed him perfectly. Accept the trial and risk Mireia and the child. Refuse and watch his daughter's legitimacy be questioned forever. Kaylin's wolf howled for blood. His claws extended. The gathered wolves backed away from the rage pouring off their alpha in waves. Garrick and two warriors moved to physically restrain him, not to stop him, but to keep him from doing something that would violate sacred ceremony law and break the alliances he'd spent years building. Alpha, Garrick said urgently. Think. She wants you to lose control. He was right. This was the trap. React with violence, prove himself unstable. Refuse the trial, confirm the doubts. Accept the trial, risk everything he loved. There was no good choice. Kaylin forced his wolf back through sheer force of will. Forced his claws to retract. When he spoke, his voice was arctic and absolute. I reject your false evidence. Those letters are forgeries. That witness is paid or coerced. And your blood magic analysis is. Then prove it. Serena's voice was silken steel. Let the moon trial verify truth. If the child is yours, the ancestors will confirm it. If she's not. She spread her hands. Then Northridge deserves to know before succession law is permanently complicated. Before Kaylin could respond, a voice cut through the tension like a blade. You want proof? Every wolf turned. Mireia stood at the edge of the ceremonial circle, wrapped in her fur-lined cloak, visibly pregnant, alone. She'd walked into the gathering without guards, without announcement, drawn by the commotion or maybe by instinct that her child was being threatened. She looked directly at Serena, and her expression was carved from ice. Then I call for Sacred Moon Trial. The crowd went silent. Shocked. Because the accused didn't usually call for their own trial. It was too dangerous, too painful, too likely to harm them even if they were proven innocent. Kaylin started forward. Mireia, no. She held up a hand, stopping him without looking his direction. Her eyes never left Serena. You've questioned my honor. My child's legitimacy. My fitness as former Luna. So let the ancestors answer. Let them show every wolf here whose daughter I'm carrying. Let them reveal who's been spreading lies and forging evidence. Serena's composure flickered. Just for a heartbeat. Just long enough for Kaylin to see uncertainty flash behind her eyes. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected Mireia to call her bluff. Elder Morvain stepped forward, leaning heavily on his ceremonial staff. Child, you understand what you're asking? Moon trials are painful for any wolf. For one carrying a pup. He shook his head. The magic is invasive. Dangerous. I cannot guarantee your safety or the child's. I understand. Mireia's hand rested on her belly. But I won't let my daughter enter this world with lies attached to her name. If the trial can prove truth, then we do the trial. Kaylin closed the distance between them in 3 strides. Positioned himself at her side, his voice for her ears only. You don't have to do this. I can shut this down. Invoke Alpha authority and prove Serena right that you're protecting me because you know the child isn't yours. Mireia finally looked at him, and her eyes held steel he recognized from the woman who'd once fought beside him. No. This ends now. On my terms. Mireia. It's not your choice. The words were gentle but absolute. The bond is severed, remember? You don't get to decide what I risk. The reminder hit like a fist. Because she was right. He had no legal claim to stop her. No mate bond that gave him authority over her decisions. She'd taken his own respect for her autonomy and weaponized it. Brilliant. Terrifying. Completely her. Kaelan turned to Morvain, his voice carrying across the silent gathering. If she undergoes moon trial, I want every safeguard in place. Healers standing by. Protective circles. Emergency intervention protocols. Agreed, Morvain said. He looked at Mireia with something like respect and deep concern. Are you certain, child? Once we begin, the magic cannot be stopped until it reveals its truth. Mireia's chin lifted. Her daughter kicked, as if answering for her. I'm certain. Alpha Darius cleared his throat. When shall the trial be held? Morvain studied the sky, calculating moon phases. 3 days. The full moon rises then. We'll conduct the trial in the sacred grove under ancestral witness. 3 days, Serena echoed. Her composure had returned, smooth and confident. Plenty of time to prepare. But Kaelan saw it, the way her hands clenched slightly at her sides. The way her eyes tracked Mireia with calculation rather than concern. She'd created this situation expecting either refusal or alpha intervention. Mireia's acceptance had disrupted her plan. Good. Let her be unsettled. Let her wonder what truth the trial would actually reveal. The gathering dispersed slowly, wolves breaking into urgent conversations. Visiting alphas approached Kaelan with careful diplomatic inquiries. Warriors formed protective clusters, glaring at the Silverpaw delegation. Mireia turned to leave, but Kaelan caught her arm gently. She stiffened but didn't pull away. We need to talk, he said quietly. Before the trial. There are things you need to know about the ritual sabotage, about Serena, about... I know about the sabotage. Mireia's voice was low enough that only he could hear. I know the bond wasn't truly severed. I know Serena's been positioning herself since I left. And I know she's probably the one who sent the threatening letters. Kaelan stared at her. How? Because I'm not helpless, and I'm not stupid. She finally looked at him fully. I've been investigating too. Documenting. Building a case. The trial isn't just about proving our daughter's parentage. It's about exposing whoever's been manipulating us both. Understanding crashed through him. She hadn't called for the trial impulsively. She'd called for it strategically. Because moon trials didn't just verify bloodlines, they revealed truth in all its forms. Lies. Deception. Hidden motivations. If Serena had forged evidence, if she'd sent those letters, if she'd sabotaged the severance ritual, the ancestral magic would expose all of it. You're using yourself as bait, Kaelan said. I'm ending this, Mireia corrected. Before our daughter is born into a war we didn't start but will finish. She pulled free of his grip and walked away, leaving Kaelan standing in the ceremonial circle, torn between pride at her courage and terror at what the next 3 days would bring. Because moon trials revealed truth. But truth had a price. And he had no idea if Mireia, or their daughter, could afford to pay it. 2 days passed in tense preparation. Morvain assembled the ritual components under guard. Healers prepared emergency interventions. Warriors posted triple patrols around the sacred grove. And Kaelan tried not to think about all the ways moon trials could go catastrophically wrong. The night before the ceremony, he couldn't stay away anymore. Promises be damned. If something happened to Mireia during the trial, if he lost her before he could make things right, he'd regret every moment he'd spent honoring distance over instinct. So he walked to her cabin under winter stars and positioned himself on the porch. Didn't knock. Didn't demand entry. Just shifted to wolf form and settled against the door like a living barrier between her and the world. Inside, he heard her moving. Knew she was aware of his presence. Impossible not to be when an alpha wolf was radiating protective intent hard enough to warm the surrounding snow. An hour passed. Then her voice came through the wood, muffled but clear. You can't stay out there all night. Watch me, Kalen rumbled. His wolf's voice was deeper, rougher than human speech. Silence. Then, you'll freeze. I've slept in worse conditions during border wars. That was different. You had a reason then. I have a reason now. More silence. Longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. Uncertain. Why are you really here, Kalen? He shifted back to human, not caring about the cold biting his bare skin. Because tomorrow you're walking into something dangerous, and I can't protect you from it. So tonight I'm protecting you from everything else. There's nothing else to protect me from tonight. Then I'm protecting you from your own thoughts. He leaned his back against the door. I know you, Mireya. You're in there planning every worst-case scenario, preparing for pain, convincing yourself you have to face this alone. You don't. The bond is severed. The bond is suppressed. There's a difference. He heard her sharp intake of breath. She hadn't expected him to say it directly. And even if it were truly severed, even if magic and destiny and every law said we were done, I'd still be here. Because you're the mother of my child. Because you're the woman I chose. Because letting you face tomorrow alone would make me the coward you probably think I am. I don't think you're a coward, she said softly. What do you think I am? Long pause. I think you're a male who didn't see the danger until it was too late. I think you're an alpha who prioritized pack politics over protecting what mattered most. I think. Her voice cracked slightly. I think you loved me. But not enough to notice I was drowning. The words hit like silver through his chest. Because they were true. All of it. You're right, he said. I failed you. I was so focused on being Alpha King, maintaining territory, managing alliances, projecting strength, that I missed my own mate falling apart. I didn't see the fear. Didn't catch the warning signs. Didn't ask the right questions when you started pulling away. You asked questions. I asked alpha questions. What's wrong? How do I fix it? Tell me who to fight. I never asked. He stopped, swallowed hard. I never asked if you felt safe with me. If my protection felt like security or suffocation. If being Luna meant partnership or performance. Mireya made a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob. You asked those questions now. After everything fell apart. Better late than catastrophically never. He pressed his palm flat against the door, imagining he could feel her on the other side. Tell me about the letters, Mireya. Not the threats, I know those. Tell me what they said that made you believe them. What made them credible enough that you'd amputate our bond to keep our daughter safe. Silence stretched. Then he heard footsteps. Movement. The bolt sliding. The door opened. Mireya stood there, backlit by firelight, one hand on her belly. She wore simple clothes, soft pants, an oversized tunic that accommodated her pregnancy. Her hair was loose, dark waves falling past her shoulders. She looked exhausted and beautiful and fragile in ways she'd never let herself be when they were bonded. Come inside, she said. Before you actually freeze and I have to explain to the pack why their alpha died of hypothermia on my porch. Kalen rose slowly, giving her time to change her mind. She stepped back. He entered. The door closed behind them, and suddenly the cabin felt impossibly small, the air between them charged with everything unsaid. Mireya moved to the hearth but didn't sit. Just stood there with the flames painting shadows across her face, one hand never leaving her belly. The letters knew things, she said quietly. Private things. They referenced conversations I'd had with you in our quarters, word for word. They knew about the Shadowfang territory dispute before it was publicly announced. They knew I was pregnant before I'd confirmed it with the healer. She looked at him finally. That kind of knowledge meant someone close. Someone inside our inner circle. Someone I should have been able to trust. So you trusted no one. I trusted our daughter's survival over my own sanity. Her hand pressed protectively against her belly. The letters said the mate bond made her vulnerable. That enemies could track her through our connection, use bond magic to stop her heart before she was born. They said severance would hide her, make her invisible to magical detection. That's not how mate bonds work, Kaylin said, frustration bleeding through. Bonds protect children. Make them stronger, not weaker. I know that now. But when you're terrified and isolated and someone is feeding you information that sounds authoritative. She shook her head. I believed them because they knew things they shouldn't. Because the alternative was risking her life on assumptions about how magic supposedly works. Kaylin forced himself to stay still, to not close the distance between them and pull her into his arms like every instinct screamed at him to do. What else did they say? Mireya's eyes went distant. They said if I told you about the threats, you'd go on a rampage trying to find them. That your response would make things worse, make you a target, make our entire pack vulnerable. They said. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. They said the only way to protect everyone was to cut you out completely. Sever the bond, disappear, let you move on without the liability of a mate and A who were marked for death. Marked by who? They never said. Just implied it was enemies from outside, rivals who wanted to destabilize Northridge by eliminating your heir before she was born. Mireya finally looked at him directly. I know now it was probably Serena. That she fed me lies to isolate me, remove me from the picture, position herself as your next Luna. But at the time, I was terrified and desperate and willing to believe anything that might keep our daughter alive. Kaylin's hands clenched into fists. His wolf clawed at his control, demanding he hunt down Serena immediately and tear her apart for what she'd done. But Mireya was watching him with careful eyes, waiting to see if he'd lose control. So he breathed, counted, forced the rage down to something he could contain. I won't lose control, he said quietly. I won't go on a rampage. I won't do anything that puts you or our daughter at risk. Mireya studied him like she was reading truth in the set of his shoulders. You mean that? Yes. The old Kaylin would have already been out the door, hunting for blood. The old Kaylin was an idiot who thought protection meant violence. He took one careful step closer. The new Kaylin is trying to learn that sometimes protection means restraint. Means listening instead of commanding. Means trusting you to handle your own battles. Something shifted in her expression. Not forgiveness, too soon for that. But maybe the beginning of trust rebuilding. She moved to the small couch near the fire and lowered herself carefully. Gestured to the space beside her. Sit. You look like you're about to collapse, and I'm not explaining that to Garrick either. Kaylin sat, maintaining distance between them. Close enough to feel her warmth, far enough to respect her boundaries. They sat in silence for long minutes. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the windows. Their daughter kicked visibly against Mireya's belly, and Kaylin tracked the movement with hungry eyes. You can feel it, Mireya said softly. If you want. His breath caught. Are you sure? Instead of answering, she took his hand and placed it on her belly where their daughter was most active. For a moment, nothing. Then, a strong kick directly against his palm. Kaylin's wolf surged with joy so pure it was almost painful. His daughter. Alive. Strong. Real in a way she'd only been abstract concept before. She's a fighter, he managed past the tightness in his throat. She gets that from both of us. Mireya's hand covered his, holding it in place. She's been especially active since we came back to pack territory. Like she knows she's home. What does she need? The question came out rough. Magically, I mean. Is the suppressed bond affecting her development? Is she? She's healthy. The healers have confirmed it. Mireya's thumb traced absent circles on the back of his hand. But after the trial, if the bond can be safely restored, it would help her. Give her stronger connection to pack magic, better protection, access to both our bloodlines fully. If. He looked at her. You said if. Mireya met his eyes. Because I don't know if I can trust the bond again. Even if the severance was sabotaged, even if we were manipulated, we still fell apart, Kaylin. We still failed each other when it mattered most. So we learn from that. We build something stronger. Or we repeat the same patterns and hurt each other worse the second time. Kaylin wanted to argue. Wanted to promise they'd be different, better, unbreakable. But he'd made promises before and failed to keep them. So instead, he said the only truth he had left. I don't know if we can fix this. I don't know if the bond can be restored or if you'll ever trust me again or if we can be what we were before everything fell apart. His hand pressed more firmly against her belly, feeling their daughter move beneath his palm. But I know I'll spend the rest of my life trying. And I know that whatever happens tomorrow, whatever the trial reveals, whatever price it demands, you and our daughter will survive it. Because I won't accept any other outcome. Mireya's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You can't promise that. Moon trials are dangerous. The magic doesn't care about what you'll accept. Then the magic will learn I'm more stubborn than destiny. She laughed, actually laughed, wet and surprised. You can't intimidate ancestral magic. Watch me. They sat like that for hours. Kaelin's hand on her belly, feeling his daughter kick and roll. Mireya leaning gradually closer until her head rested on his shoulder. Not intimacy, exactly. Just exhaustion and comfort and the fragile beginning of something that might become trust again. Near dawn, Mireya spoke one final time. Voice small and frightened in a way she never let herself be. If something goes wrong tomorrow. If the trial hurts me, if I can't. She stopped, swallowed. Promise me you'll protect her. Not me. Her. Whatever it takes. Kaelin's arms came around her carefully, holding her without caging. I promise to protect you both. That's the only vow I'm making. Kaelin. You don't get to ask me to choose between you and our daughter. You don't get to prepare me for losing you. Whatever happens in that grove, we face it together. He pressed his lips to her hair. And if the ancestors try to take you from me, they're going to learn that some wolves don't accept destiny lying down. Mireya was quiet against his chest. Then, she needs a name. In case. Don't. In case, she insisted. If something happens to me, she needs to know what I wanted to call her. Kaelin's throat tightened. What name? Lyra. Mireya's hand found his, laced their fingers together over her belly. It means brave heart in the old language. And she's been fighting since the moment she was conceived, fighting threats, fighting fear, fighting for her right to exist despite everyone who tried to stop her. Lyra Ashwood Thorne, Kaelin tested. Their daughter kicked in response, as if approving. She likes it, Mireya whispered. So do I. Dawn broke slowly. Light filtered through the cabin windows, painting everything gold. The day of the moon trial had arrived. Mireya pulled away reluctantly, standing with effort. I need to prepare. The trial begins at moonrise. Kaelin stood too. I'll walk you to the grove when it's time. You don't have to. I know. But I'm going to anyway. He moved toward the door, then paused. Mireya. Yes. Whatever truth the ancestors reveal tonight, about the letters, about Serena, about the bond, remember that our daughter is real. Our love was real. And nothing anyone did can change that we chose each other once. We can choose each other again. She didn't answer. But the look in her eyes said maybe. Just maybe. And for now, maybe was enough. The sacred grove pulsed with ancient power. Massive oaks formed a natural cathedral, their branches weaving overhead like skeletal fingers against the deepening twilight. The full moon hung fat and silver, not yet crested but close enough that Kaelin could feel its pull in his marrow. Pack members filled the surrounding forest, hundreds of wolves creating a living amphitheater. Visiting alphas and their delegations occupied positions of honor. Warriors lined the inner circle, weapons ceremonial but ready. This wasn't just a trial. It was a reckoning. Elder Morvain stood at the center, ancient and terrifying in his formal robes. Symbols glowed faintly along the hem, protection wards activated by proximity to sacred ground. Around him, the ritual circle had been drawn in fresh silver ash, intricate patterns that hurt to look at directly. Kaelin escorted Mireya through the parted crowd. She walked with her head high, pregnancy evident but not diminishing her presence. Wolves lowered their eyes in respect, some out of tradition, others because the determination radiating from her demanded it. Serena watched from the Silverpaw delegation, perfectly composed. But Kaelin caught the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers drummed against her thigh. She was nervous. Good. At the circle's edge, Mireya squeezed his hand once, brief, grounding, then released him and stepped inside alone. The assembled wolves fell silent. Morvain's voice carried across the grove, resonant with power. Mireia Ashwood, you have called Sacred Moon trial to prove truth regarding the child you carry. Do you understand the risks? I understand. Her voice didn't waver. Then speak your intention before the ancestors. Mireia turned slowly, addressing the entire gathering. I call upon ancestral magic to verify that the child I carry is Kaelin Thorne's daughter, conceived within our mate bond before severance. I call upon that same magic to reveal who forged evidence against me, who sent threatening letters, who sabotaged our bond ritual. Her gaze found Serena. I call upon truth to expose the liar hiding among us. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Moon trials typically verified one specific claim, not multiple accusations. What Mireia proposed was dangerous, invasive, potentially deadly. The trial you request will require complete magical exposure, Morvain warned. Every secret, every memory related to these claims will be laid bare. There is no privacy, no protection, no mercy. Are you certain? I'm certain. The elder nodded gravely. He raised his staff, and moonlight concentrated above the circle like liquid silver being poured from the sky itself. The magic hit Mireia like a physical force. She gasped, body arching, but remained standing. Light wrapped around her, searching, probing, reading every cell and memory with ruthless precision. Kaelin's wolf howled inside his chest. Every instinct demanded he break the circle and pull her out. Garrick's hand clamped on his shoulder, holding him back. Let the magic work, the warrior murmured. If you interfere, it could kill her. Above Mireia, images began to form, translucent, ghostly, but undeniably clear. The assembled wolves watched their courtship unfold. Their bonding ceremony. Private moments that made Kaelin's chest ache with loss. Then, conception. The magic traced bloodlines with mathematical precision, showing Kaelin's essence combining with Mireia's, showing the exact moment their daughter came into being. No ambiguity. No doubt. The child was his. Murmurs of approval swept the crowd. The first accusation had been answered. But the magic didn't stop. It dug deeper, searching for related truths. Images shifted to the severance ritual. The gathered wolves watched Morvain perform the ceremony, but then the ancestral magic revealed something the physical witnesses had missed. Hidden beneath the silver ash circle, blood magic sigils, pulsing with malicious intent. In the ceremonial moon water, traces of wolfsbane, carefully measured to corrupt without being obvious. The severance hadn't been clean. It had been poisoned. The magic traced the corruption back through time. Showed hands preparing the components in darkness. Showed silver blonde hair catching torchlight as someone whispered blood curses over ritual materials. Showed Serena's face, intent and focused, sabotaging the ceremony that would destroy Kaelin and Mireia's bond. The grove erupted. Wolves snarled. Warriors surged forward. Alpha Darius looked stricken, his daughter's betrayal playing out for everyone to witness. But the ancestral magic wasn't finished. It revealed the threatening letters, all 5, appearing in ghostly script above the circle. Then it showed their creation, Serena in a hidden chamber, forging Mireia's handwriting, composing lies designed to terrify. The magic displayed her research into mate bond vulnerabilities, her careful manipulation of timing, her strategic isolation of Mireia. Finally, it revealed her ultimate plan, eliminate the true Luna, position herself for queenship, delegitimize the heir, and claim Northridge through political marriage. Every scheme, every lie, every manipulation, exposed under moonlight that permitted no deception. Serena moved before anyone could stop her. She shifted mid-crowd, a blur of silver fur and desperate violence. Her wolf form launched toward the circle, toward Mireia, vulnerable and held immobile by the trial magic. A poisoned blade gleamed in her jaws, seized from some hidden cache. She'd come prepared for this contingency, knowing exposure meant execution unless she eliminated the primary witness. Kaelin's wolf exploded forward faster than thought. He intercepted her mid-leap, taking the poisoned blade through his shoulder instead of letting it reach Mireia's belly. Pain erupted, silver and wolfsbane burning through his veins. But he used the momentum to slam Serena into the ground, his jaws closing around her throat with enough pressure to immobilize without killing. Warriors swarmed. Garrick and 3 others wrestled Serena into silver chains while she thrashed and snarled. The poisoned blade clattered away, retrieved by a healer who handled it with careful fear. Through the chaos, Kaylin's eyes found Mireia. The trial magic was releasing her, its work complete. She swayed, drained but conscious. Their daughter kicked visibly, strong, defiant, very much alive. Morvaine's staff struck the ground with a sound like thunder. The trial is complete. The ancestors have spoken. Mireia Ashwood carries the legitimate heir of Northridge. Serena Blackwood stands condemned of sabotage, attempted murder, and treason against pack law. Alpha Darius stepped forward, his face carved from stone. Silverpaw Pack disavows her actions and accepts responsibility for her crimes. She will face pack justice. No. Kaylin's voice cut through the murmurs. He shifted back to human form, the wound in his shoulder already beginning to heal. She committed crimes against Northridge. She will face Northridge justice. The two alphas locked gazes. Then Darius nodded once, acknowledging the rightness of it. Serena was dragged away, still struggling, screaming justifications no one wanted to hear. Kaylin moved to Mireia as she collapsed. He caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest. The baby, she gasped. She's fine, Morvaine confirmed, already performing diagnostic magic. Strong heartbeat. The ancestors protected her during the trial. Relief crashed through Kaylin so powerfully his knees nearly buckled. Around them, pack members were kneeling. One by one, wolves bowed, first to Kaylin, then to Mireia. Acknowledging her as Luna whether the bond was restored or not. She'd endured a moon trial while pregnant. She'd survived betrayal and poison and ritual sabotage. She was Luna by right of strength, not just magical connection. Morvaine approached them carefully. The bond was never truly severed. I can complete the restoration now, repair what was corrupted. He looked at Mireia. If you consent. Kaylin held his breath. Everything balanced on her answer. Mireia looked at her belly, at the pack kneeling in the snow, at Kaylin's face, blood on his shoulder from the blade he'd taken for her. Not the full bond, she said finally. Her voice was steady despite exhaustion. Not yet. But a parental bond through our daughter. Enough to protect her. Enough to rebuild what was broken. Kaylin's eyes closed in profound relief. Enough, he agreed. Morvaine performed gentler magic this time. Golden light wound between them, not the overwhelming force of a mate bond, but something quieter. A connection through Lyra, linking them as parents, as protectors, as partners in raising the daughter they'd both nearly lost. It wasn't everything. But it was real. And it was theirs. 3 weeks later. Mireia stood at the forest edge, her belly fuller now, watching winter stars emerge. Kaylin approached from behind, slow and careful, still learning the boundaries of their rebuilt trust. May I? He asked, gesturing toward her belly. She nodded. His hand found the spot where Lyra kicked most vigorously. Their daughter obliged with a strong jab. The parental bond hummed between them, not complete, but healing. Growing stronger with each shared moment, each honest conversation, each choice to keep choosing one another. She needs a name, he said. Officially. Lyra, Mireia confirmed. Lyra Ashwood Thorne. Perfect. Their daughter kicked agreement. They stood together in the snow, watching stars, waiting for the spring thaw and the birth that would change everything. The pack was safe. The threat was eliminated. The bond was fractured but mending. Some bonds couldn't be severed, they could only be chosen again. And again. And again. Destiny, it turned out, didn't wait for rituals or permission. It simply was. Thank you for journeying with Kaylin and Mireia. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share where you're listening from in the comments. Your support means everything. Until our next tale, may your own bonds be unbreakable and your courage unwavering. This is just the beginning.